the announcement of the new addition to the Terran Navy had created more laughter than excitement across the galaxy. On the planet's main spaceport, a crowd of officials, engineers, and journalists gathered to witness the unveiling of the TSS Resolute. From a distance, it looked like any other warship, massive, metallic, and imposing. But as observers got closer, a wave of mockery spread among the onlookers. Its hull was thick and heavily armored, but its design was outdated, a relic from decades past. Sleek, faster, more modern ships from other nations and alien civilizations had made the Resolute appear slow, almost cumbersome. News feeds from across the galaxy carried images of the ship as it emerged from the shipyard. Alien commentators could hardly contain their ridicule. "Look at that thing! How can humanity hope to survive with that brick in space?" one commentator sneered. "It's slower than a cargo transport and heavier than a battleship of 5 systems combined," another added. The media ran countless simulations showing the Resolute being outmaneuvered by almost every other modern ship in existence. Every aspect of its design seemed to invite mockery, from its thick, cumbersome armor to its old-fashioned weapons. Even on Earth, within the human ranks, some officers were uneasy. They had seen faster ships, more advanced models with energy weapons and cutting-edge defenses. The Resolute had been considered obsolete by many, and yet it was still kept in active service. Engineers argued about its speed, tacticians doubted its effectiveness in combat, and young recruits whispered jokes in the hallways. Despite this, Captain Arlen Hayes stood before his crew and simply said, "We know what this ship can do. Let the galaxy laugh. We will do our duty regardless." The captain's calm demeanor and confidence were almost alien in themselves. Hayes had served for decades and had seen countless battles, exercises, and inspections. He had learned to read people, technology, and situations in ways others could not. To him, the Resolute was not a relic. It was a reliable vessel with loyal crew members and proven weapons systems. Its speed might be slow, but its endurance and armor were unmatched. Its railguns, although old, could punch through any shield or hull when used correctly. It was a ship built not for show but for survival in battle. The crew of the Resolute was a mixture of experienced veterans and eager young recruits. Some had been with the ship for years, seeing its strengths and weaknesses firsthand. Others had joined recently, hearing only rumors and stories influenced by the ridicule surrounding the ship. As they assembled for the launch ceremony, some could not hide their uncertainty. Would the ship truly be capable of holding its own in the dangerous stretches of space that lay ahead? Would the galaxy's laughter prove correct? The launch was a quiet affair in some ways, despite the media frenzy. Hayes oversaw every detail personally. The engines were tested, communications checked, and weapons calibrated. Crew members moved through the corridors with purpose, double-checking every system, every console, every hatch. There was tension in the air, a mixture of anticipation and unease, but also determination. This was the Resolute, and it had a mission to perform, regardless of what the galaxy thought of it. Meanwhile, alien observers from neighboring systems continued their criticism. Warships from other civilizations lingered in the outer perimeter, monitoring the launch. They shared data among themselves, each report concluding that the ship was nothing more than an outdated model, unworthy of serious attention. Some fleets even conducted mock drills, imagining how easily they could destroy it if it ever ventured into contested space. Their communications were filled with jokes and derision, treating the human ship as a symbol of weakness rather than potential. Yet within the ship, a different energy was building. Crew members who had once doubted their captain's confidence began to recognize the power of discipline, preparation, and human ingenuity. Every system checked, every drill performed, and every precaution taken reinforced their faith in the ship. They knew that speed and style were not the only measures of effectiveness in space combat. Endurance, firepower, tactical intelligence, and crew coordination mattered far more, and the Resolute excelled in each of these areas. The day of the first mission arrived, and the Resolute moved slowly out of the shipyard into open space. Observers and journalists documented every moment, ready to report another human failure. The ship's engines powered up, and it glided through the atmosphere with a mechanical grace that seemed almost deliberate in its slowness. Alien commentators watched, certain that the launch would be laughable. Yet something in the steady, purposeful movement of the ship sparked the tiniest hint of curiosity among even the harshest critics. Inside the command center, Hayes and his officers prepared for the journey ahead. Tactical simulations were reviewed, charts of space lanes examined, and communication protocols rehearsed. Every crew member knew that the galaxy expected them to fail, and in a way that made the responsibility heavier. But it also created an unusual advantage. The enemy would underestimate them. The old ship, slow and unassuming, would not draw the immediate threat that modern vessels would. Its appearance and reputation worked as a shield in themselves. The first few hours in space were calm but tense. The crew maintained strict routines, checking systems continuously and monitoring the surrounding sectors for potential threats. News channels and alien analysts continued to broadcast mockery, showing charts of faster, more agile ships supposedly outclassing the Resolute. Some young crew members who had never faced criticism before felt the sting of these jokes, but the veterans reminded them that mockery could be used as fuel. Hayes often said, "Let them laugh now. The galaxy will see the truth soon enough." The journey gave the crew time to bond. Meals were shared quietly in the mess hall. Stories of previous missions exchanged and personal connections strengthened. Young officers learned from seasoned veterans, discovering not only the technical workings of the ship but also the mindset required to survive and excel in space combat. They began to understand that speed and flashiness did not define a ship's worth. The slow, methodical systems of the Resolute, combined with the skill and courage of its crew, formed a formidable combination. As the Resolute continued through space, minor tests and drills kept the crew alert. Targeting systems were calibrated, emergency protocols rehearsed, and every weapon checked. Despite the laughter from the galaxy, a quiet confidence grew among the crew. Each exercise reinforced their knowledge, their teamwork, and their belief that the ship could do more than anyone imagined. The aliens mocked the hull's design and its perceived slowness, but inside a fire was growing, fueled by determination and the certainty that preparation and courage could outweigh ridicule. Captain Hayes spent much of this time observing the crew. He noted how quickly they adapted, how they handled pressure, and how they maintained morale despite the constant external criticism. He knew the Resolute's true strength was not just in its armor or weapons, but in its people. Every sensor operator, every engineer, and every gunnery officer contributed to a network of efficiency that could outmatch even superior technology. Hayes often reminded his team, "A ship is only as strong as the hands that guide it." Alien fleets continued to monitor the slow human ship, sharing their reports across communication networks. "It's still just a relic," one captain said dismissively. "It may survive a minor skirmish, but it will never hold against a real fleet." But the Resolute's crew ignored these statements. They focused on training, coordination, and understanding the strengths of their ship. Every system had been tested and retested, every potential weakness analyzed. By the time they reached the edge of human-controlled space, the crew was ready, mentally and technically, for any challenge the galaxy might throw at them. The ship's movement through space was deliberate and steady, a reflection of the human approach to challenges. While faster vessels darted from point to point with flashy maneuvers, the Resolute plowed forward with quiet strength, its massive hull absorbing micrometeoroid impacts, radiation bursts, and the constant pull of gravity wells from nearby planets. Every observation, every test, and every check reinforced one truth: the ship was built to last, and its crew was capable of extraordinary things when they worked together. As the first mission orders came down from Fleet Command, the crew prepared for what would become their defining challenge. The colonized systems on the border of human space had reported increased pirate activity and aggressive patrols from alien factions. Other ships were too far to respond quickly. The Resolute, slow and unimpressive though it appeared, was the closest vessel able to intervene. The galaxy had mocked the ship, but fate had chosen it for this critical task. The realization spread quietly among the crew. The moment of truth was approaching. The ship, once derided as slow, outdated, and weak, would soon face the test that would prove its worth. Captain Hayes walked among his officers, inspecting readiness, speaking quietly about strategy and reinforcing confidence. Each word, each gesture reminded the crew that the judgment of outsiders did not matter. What mattered was their mission, their people, and their determination to succeed. As the Resolute entered the deeper stretches of space, the alien fleets and observers continued their ridicule. But aboard the human ship, a sense of purpose replaced doubt. The laughter of the galaxy became background noise, irrelevant to the crew focused on duty, preparation, and survival. They had learned that appearances could be deceiving. The slow human warship might not be flashy, but it was ready, it was powerful, and it was determined. The tension built as they neared the sector where danger awaited. Every system was checked, every crew member was at their station, and the captain's calm authority inspired a quiet confidence. The Galaxy expected a failure, but within the corridors of the Resolute, the crew felt the quiet thrill of opportunity. They were about to show what they were truly capable of, not because they had the fastest engines or the newest weapons, but because they had courage, skill, and the resolve to fight when others doubted them. The Resolute, slow and unassuming, glided toward the unknown. Its armor gleamed faintly under the distant starlight, its weapons hummed quietly, and its crew prepared silently for the challenge ahead. The Galaxy laughed, but laughter would soon turn to astonishment. A legend was beginning, forged not in speed or technology, but in the determination, discipline, and unbreakable spirit of those who served aboard the slow human warship. In the quiet moments before the first encounter, the crew of the Resolute reflected on everything they had trained for. They had been mocked, underestimated, and ridiculed, yet they had not wavered. Now, as the stars stretched out before them and the edge of human-controlled space approached, they felt something profound, a sense of destiny. They were about to prove that speed was not everything, that modern designs could be outmatched by discipline and courage, and that even the slowest ship could become the deadliest force in the galaxy. The ship's engines hummed steadily as it moved forward, carrying with it the hopes of a crew, the safety of a colony, and the beginning of a story that the galaxy would never forget. The Resolute, mocked and derided, was about to demonstrate that true strength lies not in appearances but in the heart, mind, and will of those who dare to stand against impossible odds. The Resolute had been gliding steadily through space for hours, its massive frame cutting a deliberate path through the star-strewn void. Inside, the crew moved with practiced precision, running through drills and checking systems, ensuring every engine, shield, and weapon was fully operational. Though the ship was slow, it had a quiet power, a sense of patience that only those who had served long enough could recognize. Captain Arlen Hayes stood on the bridge, monitoring the tactical displays, his eyes scanning every sector of space ahead. It was a routine patrol near the outer border of human-controlled space, a region that rarely saw trouble but was critical to maintaining order. The silence was broken by a sudden alert on the communications panel. A distress signal flashed across the bridge screens, urgent and fragmented but unmistakable. It was coming from a human colony on a nearby planet, a small settlement on the edge of explored space. The signal was desperate, filled with fear and pleading for immediate assistance. Civilians were under attack, and the colonists had no means to defend themselves against the approaching fleet of alien raiders. The signal was weak and intermittent, as though the attackers were actively trying to jam or destroy it. Yet it carried the unmistakable voice of someone begging for help. Hayes's eyes narrowed. He had faced situations like this before, and his experience told him that delay could be fatal. "All hands alert status," he said quietly but firmly. "We're changing course. Set trajectory for the colony. Maximum safe warp." The officers on the bridge nodded immediately. The Resolute was not fast, it never had been, but it was reliable, steady, and heavily armored. The crew knew they were the only ones capable of reaching the colony in time. Other human warships stationed in the sector were too far to respond quickly. It would be the Resolute alone, and every second counted. The young officers glanced at each other nervously. The aliens attacking the colony were not a minor threat. They were well-armed, experienced raiders, and the colony itself had almost no defenses. Many of them had heard stories of entire settlements being wiped out in hours when caught unprepared. And here they were, aboard a ship often ridiculed as too slow and outdated, tasked with the impossible, to intercept the enemy before they could destroy innocent lives. "Captain," the tactical officer reported, "enemy fleet detected. Multiple cruisers and fast attack ships in orbit around the colony. They are heavily armed and coordinated." The display lit up with red dots, each representing a vessel moving strategically to encircle the planet. The aliens had been waiting for a vulnerable target, a human settlement they expected to fall quickly. Their confidence was evident even in their movements. They operated as if no human force could challenge them. Hayes did not flinch. He had counted odds before and had learned that strategy, patience, and timing often outweighed brute force. "Plot an intercept course," Hayes ordered. "We will not engage them until we are in position. Civilians must have cover first. We buy time and we fight only when necessary." His calm voice reassured the bridge crew even as the tension rose. Every second mattered, and the slow pace of the Resolute made timing critical. They would have to use every advantage the ship offered, its durability, heavy firepower, and the skill of its crew, to stand a chance against the fast and numerous attackers. The ship's engines hummed as it began its long, steady approach to the colony. Sensors scanned the region continuously, tracking every movement of the alien raiders. The crew worked in near silence, their focus absolute. They were aware of how the galaxy had mocked their vessel, yet the laughter seemed distant now, almost irrelevant. Here, in the void of space, only preparation and precision mattered. Each crew member moved efficiently, double-checking calculations and monitoring shield strength, aware that even the smallest mistake could have catastrophic consequences. As the Resolute drew closer, the situation on the colony became clearer. Communications intercepted from the alien raiders revealed their strategy. They planned to overwhelm the settlement's defenses quickly, destroy the communications array, and capture resources with minimal resistance. The colonists were defenseless, hiding in bunkers and improvised shelters, relying entirely on the hope that help would arrive in time. Some transmissions were fragmented screams, cries for help, and pleas for protection. The intensity of the situation sent a ripple of determination through the Resolute's crew. "Enemy formation is tightening," reported the tactical officer. "They are preparing to deploy fighters and boarding craft. Estimated time until engagement, 5 minutes. Hayes leaned forward, his hands gripping the console. "All batteries on standby. Shields at maximum. We will not falter. Engage only when the enemy fires first. Civilian lives come first." His orders were precise and unwavering, reflecting years of experience and leadership. Every crew member understood the gravity of the moment, yet there was no fear, only a shared sense of purpose. As the Resolute approached the outer perimeter of the alien fleet, tension crackled in the air. The enemy opened fire, testing the human vessel's response. Plasma beams and missile volleys struck the outer shields, sending vibrations through the massive hull. Alarms blared across the ship, but the armor held. Sparks flew from energy dampeners, and point defense turrets automatically intercepted some of the smaller projectiles. The crew reacted with efficiency, guided by drills they had performed countless times before. Every command, every action was a carefully coordinated movement toward survival. "Shields holding," the engineer called. "Hull integrity stable. Weapon systems ready." The gunnery officer, Lieutenant Mason, glanced at the tactical displays, hands moving over controls with precision. "Targeting data locked on," he said. "Main battery standing by." Hayes nodded. "Wait for my signal. Focus on precision. Protect the colony first, destroy the enemy second." The crew's training had prepared them for this moment. They were not just operating a ship. They were orchestrating a symphony of human ingenuity against overwhelming odds. The alien raiders, confident in their superior speed and numbers, continued their assault, firing volleys intended to intimidate and overwhelm. But the crew of the Resolute had anticipated this. They moved as a single unit, coordinating shields, weapons, and movement. The slow pace of the ship, often criticized, became an advantage. Every maneuver was deliberate, every shot calculated. They were not chasing the enemy. They were controlling the battlefield, forcing the attackers into positions where the human ship could maximize its impact. Inside the engineering decks, Chief Engineer Valen worked tirelessly. Sparks flew as he rerouted power from auxiliary systems to boost the main batteries and reinforce the shields. "We're slow, but we're solid," he muttered to his team. "Every shot counts. Every second counts. Don't let them break us." His words reflected the mood throughout the ship. Confidence had replaced uncertainty. Focus had replaced fear, and determination had replaced doubt. They were ready to turn what others saw as weakness into their greatest strength. As the colony came into view, the extent of the threat became horrifyingly clear. Alien ships were already firing on civilian structures, destroying supply depots, and targeting evacuation craft. Flashes of light and small explosions dotted the planet's surface, a stark reminder of what was at stake. The cries of those trapped below reached the crew through intercepted transmissions, strengthening their resolve. Hayes's eyes narrowed. "We are their shield." he said softly, almost to himself. We will not fail. The first wave of alien fighters moved in to attack the Resolute directly, attempting to exploit its slower speed. The gunnery officer engaged point defense systems, and railguns were powered to full capacity. Though the ship's cannons were considered outdated by modern standards, their destructive potential at close and medium range was devastating. Each projectile was guided with precision, and the first enemy ships were destroyed almost instantly. The crew's confidence surged. They had transformed the ship's perceived flaws into tactical advantages. The alien commander, sensing unexpected resistance, began issuing frantic orders. Focus fire. Don't let that human brick survive. Yet every maneuver they attempted to outflank the Resolute was anticipated. Captain Hayes's decades of experience in fleet tactics allowed him to predict enemy movements, using the ship's armor and weaponry to control the engagement. The alien fleet, confident in its superiority, was now beginning to hesitate. The slow human ship had disrupted their strategy, turning the expected quick victory into a tense, unpredictable encounter. As the first real engagement began, the crew moved with synchronized efficiency. Shields absorbed initial impacts, weapons fired in coordinated volleys, and engineering teams ensured that systems remained functional despite constant strain. The humans were not just reacting, they were dictating the pace of the battle. Their confidence grew with every successful defensive maneuver and every enemy ship destroyed. The colonists below, though still in danger, had a fighting chance now, thanks to the slow but resilient warship above. Through the chaos, Captain Hayes maintained calm and authority. His decisions were deliberate, prioritizing civilian safety while exploiting every opportunity to neutralize the alien threat. Conserve our firepower for critical targets, he instructed. Every shot must count. Every life saved is more important than glory. The crew internalized these orders immediately. Each operator, engineer, and officer knew the stakes, and every action was executed with precision and intent. The alien fleet, previously confident, began to realize the gravity of underestimating the Resolute. Their attacks became more cautious, and their communications reflected frustration and fear. The slow human ship was holding, even dominating, a battle it was never expected to survive. The crew, initially nervous, now felt a surge of purpose. Their training, discipline, and teamwork were proving that speed and technology alone did not define victory. As the Resolute closed in on the colony, the alien raiders regrouped, preparing for a more concentrated assault. The ship's crew remained undeterred. They had faced mockery, doubt, and fear, yet they had emerged ready to confront the enemy. Every crew member understood that the next moments would define not only the fate of the colony, but also the reputation of humanity's slowest, most ridiculed warship. Captain Hayes issued the order to continue the approach. Prepare to engage on my mark, he said. The crew braced themselves, hands steady on controls, eyes scanning displays, minds focused entirely on the task ahead. The aliens might have thought the Resolute was a relic, slow and ineffective, but they were about to learn that appearances could be deceiving, and that human courage, strategy, and determination could turn the odds in ways no one had predicted. The Resolute, moving with deliberate, unstoppable determination, advanced toward the heart of the conflict. The battle to defend the colony was about to begin, and the galaxy's laughter would soon give way to astonishment. As the Resolute came, out of warp space, a terrible sight filled every screen on the bridge. The colony below was burning. The surface was scattered with fire and smoke, and in orbit above it floated a ring of alien ships, moving like vultures around a dying prey. Small civilian transports tried to escape, but the enemy fired at them without mercy. Some ships exploded in flashes of light, leaving nothing but drifting debris. For a moment, the crew of the Resolute stood silent, their hearts sinking at the sight. The communications officer reported that the colony's distress signal was still active, but weakening. Thousands of civilians were trapped below, hiding in bunkers, praying someone would come to save them. But the truth was hard to ignore. Only the Resolute was close enough, and everyone knew it was too slow and too old to face a modern enemy fleet. On every channel, the aliens laughed, sending open transmissions filled with mockery. "So the humans send a museum ship to stop us?" one alien captain said, his voice dripping with amusement. "Do you think your ancient cannonballs can hurt us?" Captain Arlen Hayes listened without showing emotion. He was a calm man, gray-haired and steady with the kind of silence that carried authority. He turned to his crew and simply said, "We go in." His voice had no fear in it. Around him, young officers exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them dared to argue. They had trained for years under Hayes. They knew that when he made a decision, it came from experience, not arrogance. The ship began to move forward, engines humming deeply as the metal structure creaked under the strain. The Resolute was never meant to move fast, but when she did, it felt like a giant awakening from a long sleep. The enemy ships, faster and more agile, began to form a circle around her, waiting to crush her from all sides. In the command center, tactical screens showed dozens of red dots, enemy cruisers, fighters, and bombers, closing in fast. The ship's AI, an outdated but loyal system named Argus, reported their odds of survival at less than 5%. Hayes simply said, "We've faced worse." Then he gave the order, "Battle stations, bring main batteries online." Deep inside the belly of the ship, the lights flickered on across ancient corridors that had not been used in years. Engineers ran between stations, shouting to each other as heavy machinery began to wake. Hydraulic pistons pushed massive shells into magnetic rails. The sound of gears and hissing steam filled the lower decks. The old kinetic cannons, giant metal guns that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams, started to hum with power. These weapons were considered outdated because they lacked the precision of energy weapons. But there was one thing the aliens had forgotten. No shield could stop solid matter traveling at hypervelocity. The first wave of enemy fighters arrived. Bright blue plasma bolts struck the armor of the Resolute, creating explosions that shook the hull. Sparks flew across the bridge and the lights dimmed for a moment. But the armor held. It was made of reinforced titanium layered with carbon. Composite, old human craftsmanship that favored endurance over elegance. The gunnery officer, Lieutenant Mason, shouted, "Main batteries ready." Hayes gave a slow nod. "Target their lead cruiser," he said. The ship's targeting systems locked on, and the first kinetic round launched. A thunderous vibration echoed through the decks as a solid tungsten slug the size of a car shot out into space at incredible speed. It crossed the distance in seconds, invisible to the naked eye. A moment later, the alien cruiser erupted in a massive explosion. The entire enemy formation hesitated. They had not expected the old ship to fire such devastating force. "Hit confirmed," Mason yelled, his voice filled with disbelief. The aliens quickly regrouped, now taking the threat seriously. Dozens of plasma torpedoes streaked through space, lighting it up like fireworks. Some hit the Resolute's shields, others slammed into her armor. Crew members were thrown from their stations as alarms blared. Fire suppression systems activated automatically. Despite the chaos, Captain Hayes remained calm. "Damage report," he ordered, "shields at 60%. "Forward armor holding," the officer replied. "Good," Hayes said. "Keep firing." Round after round tore through space. Every shot from the Resolute's cannons was like a hammer blow. One enemy frigate tried to rush them head-on, but a barrage of tungsten shells ripped it apart before it could even fire. Another ship attempted to flank, but the old human battleship turned with surprising precision, using thrusters and timing that came only from decades of crew experience. In the engineering deck, Chief Engineer Valen worked like a man possessed. He rerouted power from life support backups into weapon systems, sweating under the heat and noise. "If we're dying today," he said with a grin, "we're taking them with us." Sparks flew as circuits overloaded, but the power surged where it was needed most, into the main railguns. Outside, the battle turned brutal. The alien ships began to coordinate, firing in volleys. Plasma beams sliced through the void, grazing the Resolute's flank. A small explosion rocked the port side, and the hull began to vent atmosphere. Medics rushed to seal off the damaged section, as crew members worked desperately to stabilize power. But despite the odds, morale on the Resolute did not break. The crew had served together for years, surviving countless drills and minor skirmishes. They trusted each other completely. When the communications officer reported that the colony's Survivors were still holding out in underground shelters, Hayes simply said. Then we'll buy them time. The ship turned toward the planet, putting itself directly between the enemy and the colony below. Every blast that hit now struck the Resolute's armor, sparing the people on the surface. The alien commander, frustrated, demanded surrender over open comms. You can't win this, human, the voice hissed. Your ship is obsolete. Stand down and we might let you live. Hayes looked at the comms officer and said, Send a message. The officer nodded. What should I say, sir? Tell them, Hayes said quietly. We don't run. The next few minutes were chaos. The alien fleet closed in, attacking from all directions. But the closer they got, the deadlier the Resolute became. Her point defense turrets shredded incoming missiles. Her railguns continued to thunder. The old warship was no longer a relic. It was a fortress. Inside the weapons control room, Lieutenant Mason and his team worked with rapid precision, manually loading and firing as automated systems overheated. Their faces were smeared with oil and sweat, but their eyes burned with focus. Each time a target was locked, Mason would shout, Fire! And another alien ship would vanish in flames. As the battle dragged on, both sides suffered damage, but the aliens began to falter. Their shields, designed for energy resistance, could not adapt to the brute force of physical slugs. Each impact tore open hulls and shattered engines. In frustration, the enemy commander ordered all ships to retreat temporarily and regroup. When the shooting stopped for a brief moment, the silence on the bridge of the Resolute felt strange. The crew looked around at each other, stunned. They were still alive. The ship was damaged, smoking and bleeding air from several decks, but she was standing. Hayes looked at the tactical screen showing wreckage drifting all around them. They'll be back, he said quietly. Let's make sure we're ready. His officers nodded without hesitation. They had seen what their ship could do. For the first time in years, they didn't feel like the forgotten crew of an obsolete ship. They felt like warriors, guardians of their people. As emergency lights flickered and engineers worked frantically to restore systems, the colony sent a final message. We see you up there. Thank you. Hayes smiled faintly at the words. Around him, exhausted faces lit up with renewed strength. They knew this fight wasn't over, but they had proven something the galaxy had long forgotten. Human courage and grit were not measured by speed or technology. It was measured by the will to stand when others would kneel. The crew prepared for the next wave, their hearts steady, their faith unshaken. The old ship groaned as systems rebooted, her ancient guns cooling down for the briefest moment. Outside, debris from destroyed enemy ships floated silently, a dark reminder of what the slow human warship was capable of. As the stars glimmered across the battlefield, the Resolute stood like an iron guardian between the colony and the void, ready to fight again. The galaxy's laughter had faded, replaced by fear, and deep within the metal heart of the old ship, something powerful had awakened, a reminder that humanity's strength was never in its machines, but in the unbreakable spirit of those who commanded them. The Resolute had barely caught its breath when the alien fleet began to regroup. From the distance, dozens of warships started converging toward the human battleship, their engines glowing brightly against the black backdrop of space. The alien commander, furious at the earlier losses, barked orders over the open comm channels, their voice trembling with rage. Destroy that pathetic vessel. Show them no mercy. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Hayes remained calm. His crew, though exhausted, had grown confident after the first engagement. They knew their ship had endured the initial assault, and now it was time to strike back with full force. Tactical officers rapidly scanned the incoming fleet, marking each ship's trajectory and shield status. Every red dot on the screens represented an enemy determined to end them. Every dot would soon represent a target destroyed. Lieutenant Mason, the gunnery officer, leaned over the control panel, his fingers moving quickly over the buttons and levers. Main batteries fully operational. Magnetic accelerators at peak charge, he reported. Engineers shouted from below decks as they rerouted additional power to the weapon systems, their arms greasy, faces smeared with sweat and grime. Every section of the old battleship was alive with activity, a symphony of mechanical hums and clanking metal. Prepare all batteries, Hayes commanded. Target their lead cruiser first. Let's make them regret underestimating us. His voice was steady, unwavering, carrying the weight of experience and authority. The crew responded instantly, their training and instincts taking over. This was no longer about a slow, outdated ship. It was about precision, discipline, and the unyielding spirit of its crew. The first salvo launched, and the effect was instantaneous. Tungsten slugs, fired from the Resolute's heavy railguns, tore through the enemy formation. The lead alien cruiser did not even have time to activate its shields before the solid projectiles smashed into its hull, ripping through armor, fuel lines, and internal systems. The ship erupted in a blinding explosion, sending fragments tumbling through space. The enemy paused, shock and fear evident in their open communications. "Impossible. How can a relic destroy a modern cruiser?" their commander shouted. But the Resolute did not pause. As the first target was obliterated, the crew rapidly acquired new targets, firing one devastating volley after another. Every shot was calculated, each impact precise, demonstrating years of experience and coordination. Alien ships tried to respond with energy-based weapons, firing plasma beams and torpedoes toward the human battleship. Many of these attacks struck the thick armor, bouncing off harmlessly, while others were intercepted by point defense turrets. Sparks flew across the hull, alarms blared, and the bridge shook with the impact of near misses. Crew members held fast to their stations, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Even under fire, their focus never wavered. Meanwhile, engineers below decks worked tirelessly. Chief Engineer Valen shouted orders over the noise, rerouting auxiliary power to stabilize the failing shields. Sparks flew, metal hissed under stress, and the smell of ozone filled the corridors. "We've got this," Valen yelled, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Keep those guns firing!" Each crew member knew the stakes. Their ship was slow, yes, but it was a fortress bristling with weapons, and they would use every ounce of it. As the battle intensified, enemy formations attempted to flank the Resolute. Faster alien cruisers and fighters tried to overwhelm the old warship with numbers and agility, but the human crew anticipated their moves. Using the ship's thrusters with careful timing, the Resolute shifted position, presenting her strongest armor to incoming fire while bringing her railguns to bear on the advancing targets. The coordination was flawless, almost artistic, and devastatingly effective. Missiles streaked through space, and alien bombers attempted kamikaze attacks on the ship's sides. Point defense turrets tracked each incoming projectile, firing countermeasures at lightning speed. The deck shook as near misses exploded outside, but inside, the crew remained steady, eyes locked on their mission. Each kill added to the crew's confidence. The alien fleet was learning far too late that brute force alone could not overcome human determination. Then came the moment that changed everything. A massive alien dreadnought larger than any ship the Resolute had ever faced charged toward them. Its energy shields glowed brightly, and every cannon on its hull threatened to tear the human ship apart. On the bridge, the crew exchanged tense glances. Even Hayes's calm demeanor betrayed a flicker of concern. "This one we take together," he said. "Concentrate all firepower." The crew moved as one. Every railgun fired and torpedoes launched from hidden tubes, striking the dreadnought simultaneously. The impact of solid projectiles against reinforced shields created flashes of light and heat that illuminated space. The dreadnought rocked under the blows, but its shields held. Hayes did not hesitate. "Prepare for secondary volleys. Target weak points." Engineers rerouted every possible watt of power to the main batteries, pushing the rails beyond standard capacity. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the ship vibrated violently under the strain. Finally, the assault broke through. One of the massive tungsten slugs pierced a critical shield generator on the dreadnought. Energy systems overloaded. Explosions rippled through the alien ship, and within moments it was ripped apart in a spectacular display. Pieces of its hull tumbled in all directions, some spinning dangerously close to the Resolute. Crew members held their breaths, watching the destruction they had caused. The remaining alien ships faltered. Their attacks became disorganized, panic spreading through their formations. Faster cruisers tried to escape, but the Resolute's long-range targeting systems were relentless. Each projectile, fired with deadly precision, found its mark. One by one, alien ships were disabled or destroyed. The humans, slow but precise, had turned their supposed weakness into an advantage. During a brief lull, the communications officer reported the colony below. Miraculously, they were safe, taking shelter as best they could. The crew allowed themselves a short, silent nod of satisfaction. They had defended the people they swore to protect. But the battle was not over. More enemy reinforcements were on the way, and the Resolute was still the slowest ship in the area. Captain Hayes, though tired, stood firm. "We show them humanity doesn't retreat," he said, his voice carrying across the bridge. "We fight with what we have, and we fight with everything." His words inspired the crew, filling them with renewed determination. Each officer and crew member returned to their stations, ready to continue the assault. Outside, space was a chaotic storm of fire and debris. The alien fleet, once confident, now fought desperately. They had underestimated the old battleship and its crew. Every movement the Resolute made was precise, every shot devastating. She moved like a predator, slow to approach but unstoppable once engaged. The aliens could not adapt fast enough to counter her heavy, methodical strikes. The bridge crew, exhausted but unbroken, continued to coordinate attacks. Lieutenant Mason guided the railguns, predicting enemy movements, while the communications officer monitored incoming signals. Every warning, every taunt from the alien command was met with quiet determination. No fear, no hesitation. Just the will to survive, the will to protect, and the will to fight. The Resolute's weapons roared again, and in a final display of calculated power, she delivered a series of precision strikes that shattered the remaining alien ships' formations. They retreated, battered and demoralized, leaving the human battleship standing among the floating wreckage of their fleet. The old, slow ship had become a weapon of legend, proving that strategy, courage, and determination could outweigh speed and technology. Inside the Resolute, the crew exhaled collectively. They had faced what seemed impossible and survived. Around them, alarms were still blaring, systems still damaged, but hope and pride filled the bridge. Captain Hayes looked at his crew, their faces illuminated by the glow of consoles and fires from damaged sections. "We've made them remember us," he said softly. "This is only the beginning." The battle had forged a new reality. The galaxy had laughed at the slow human warship, but now stories of its deadly power would spread. The Resolute had awakened not just as a machine, but as a symbol of humanity's indomitable spirit. And somewhere in the silent depths of space, the enemy fleet would carry the memory of a ship they never expected, a ship slow to move but unstoppable when it struck. The crew worked on repairs, tending to the injured and preparing for the next inevitable encounter. Outside, the stars glittered, peaceful again for a moment. But within the Resolute, energy and tension coexisted. The crew had witnessed their ship's deadly potential, and they knew they would never see themselves or their enemies in the same way again. The legend of the slow human warship had truly begun. The battle had finally ended. The alien fleet, once confident and cruel, had fled into the darkness of space, leaving behind a trail of burning wreckage. The stars reflected faintly off the battered hull of the Resolute, casting long shadows across its decks. The human warship, slow and old, had survived against overwhelming odds. For the first time in decades, the crew felt something they hadn't allowed themselves to feel in a long time. Victory. But it was not just a victory of firepower. It was a victory of will, of teamwork, and of unbreakable human spirit. Captain Arlen Hayes stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical displays showing drifting debris from the destroyed enemy fleet. The screens were filled with red and orange blurs, a chaotic testament to the devastation they had caused. The crew had worked tirelessly and the ship had held together, though she bore the scars of the battle. Hayes ran a hand over the polished surface of the console, his eyes calm but thoughtful. He knew the galaxy would never underestimate the Resolute again, but he also knew that their mission was not complete. There were still lives to save, repairs to make, and lessons to learn. Around him, the crew moved with a quiet sense of pride. Engineers repaired damaged conduits, welders sealed breaches in the hull, and medics tended to the injured, who had fought and suffered alongside their ship. Every member of the crew had faced fear, exhaustion, and the constant threat of death. Yet every one of them had risen to the challenge. In the quiet moments between alarms, they shared glances, small nods, and even smiles. They had become more than a crew. They had become a family forged in fire and chaos. The colony below, still hidden in the remnants of its bunkers and shelters, sent up a communication signal. Their voices trembled with relief and gratitude. "We see you, Resolute," a young voice said over the channel. "Thank you for saving us. We thought we were done for." Hayes looked at the message, his expression softening for the first time since the battle began. "We didn't come to win glory," he said quietly. "We came to protect you. That is what we do." His words were simple yet heavy with meaning, resonating not only with his crew but with the countless humans who would hear the story later. News of the Resolute's actions spread quickly, faster than any starship could travel. Alien colonies and fleets that had once mocked humanity's slow, outdated warship now spoke of it with caution, awe, and even fear. Analysts and scholars studied the battle, trying to understand how a single sluggish human ship could decimate a modern, technologically advanced fleet. Some attributed it to luck, some to clever tactics, but those who had faced the Resolute firsthand knew the truth. It was the human crew's courage, determination, and refusal to surrender that made the difference. The story reached even the distant reaches of the galaxy. Military academies replayed the events and simulations, teaching cadets about strategy, patience, and the importance of human ingenuity. The Resolute became a symbol, not just of humanity's power, but of the idea that being underestimated could be a hidden strength. Tales of the ship's resilience and the crew's discipline spread like wildfire, inspiring other humans to embrace their own abilities, no matter the apparent odds against them. Inside the ship, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Repairs were ongoing, but the crew took moments to rest and reflect. Soldiers, engineers, and officers walked the decks, sometimes pausing to touch the armor that had held them safe. Each dent, each scorch mark, told a story of survival and determination. The younger crew members who had doubted themselves or the ship at the beginning of their assignment now walked taller, their confidence renewed. They had witnessed firsthand that even something slow and seemingly outdated could change the course of history. Captain Hayes held a private meeting with his senior officers. They discussed future strategies, the condition of the ship, and the lessons learned from the engagement. But the conversation was not purely tactical. Hayes also spoke of trust, unity, and the importance of human resilience. He reminded them that technology alone never won battles. It's not the fastest ship, the strongest shield, or the newest weapon that makes us victorious, he said. It's our will to survive, our commitment to each other, and our refusal to yield. That is what makes the Resolute deadly. In the mess hall, the crew gathered to eat a simple meal. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been in days. Laughter mixed with the occasional clink of utensils. Stories of small moments during the battle circulated. How Lieutenant Mason had manually recalibrated a cannon while dodging enemy fire, or how an engineer had improvised repairs on a failing shield generator just in time. These stories, shared with smiles and pride, reminded everyone that they had not faced the battle alone. Each life, each decision, and each act of courage had contributed to their success. As repairs continued, Captain Hayes took a quiet walk through the ship's corridors. He passed the engineering decks where sparks still flew and the medical bay, where wounded crew members rested. He nodded at each team, acknowledging their efforts. Even in exhaustion, their eyes held determination. Hayes understood that leadership was not just about giving orders, it was about sharing the burden and recognizing the sacrifices of every individual who made the mission possible. Outside, the stars were calm again, indifferent to the recent chaos. The alien fleet had retreated, but their presence lingered in the minds of the humans aboard the Resolute. They knew this was only the beginning. Other threats would emerge, other fleets would challenge humanity, and the galaxy would continue to underestimate them. But now they had proof. Humanity was not to be dismissed. The Resolute, slow and old, had shown that courage, skill, and unity could turn even a relic into a legend. The ship's communications officer reported new signals from nearby friendly fleets. Reinforcements were on the way to the colony. Civilians would be evacuated and the settlement would begin rebuilding. Relief spread across the crew. They had fought not for fame, not for medals, but to protect lives. That mission, accomplished against impossible odds, was the truest reward. Later in the captain's quarters, Hayes allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The battle had tested every skill, every decision, and every ounce of human resolve. The ship, which many had mocked as slow and outdated, had proven itself in the crucible of war. And the crew, once uncertain and fearful, had discovered their own strength. Hayes understood that the legend of the Resolute would outlive this battle. It would be remembered not just for its firepower, but for what it represented: human determination, courage, and the refusal to be underestimated. Across the ship, the crew began to repair and resupply. Systems were restored, weapons checked, and shields reinforced. Everyone knew that the galaxy would remember this day. The story of the slow human warship that had turned deadly would be told for generations. Children in distant colonies would grow up hearing about the ship that refused to surrender, and adults would teach lessons of resilience, courage, and strategy inspired by the Resolute's victory. Captain Hayes walked back to the bridge as the crew resumed their stations. The tactical displays showed calm space once more, but the memory of battle lingered. He looked at his crew, proud but aware of the responsibility still ahead. "We've proven what we are capable of," he said quietly. "Now we continue. Humanity never rests, and neither do we." The crew prepared for the next mission with renewed determination. Each officer, each sailor, knew that their actions had rewritten history. The Resolute had become more than a ship. It had become a symbol. Stories of their courage and precision would ripple across star systems, forcing allies and enemies alike to reconsider what humanity was capable of. They had turned mockery into respect, doubt into fear, and weakness into power. As the ship moved quietly through the stars, the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. The slow, underestimated human warship had proven that even in a universe of speed, advanced technology, and arrogance, the strength of the human spirit, combined with discipline and courage, could create legends. And the crew of the Resolute knew deep in their hearts that this was only the beginning of humanity's rise among the stars. The battle-scarred ship drifted into space, engines humming, hull battered but unbroken, carrying with it the legacy of courage, the story of the human will, and the promise that no enemy, no matter how advanced, would ever underestimate humanity again. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Slow does not mean weak, old does not mean useless, and humanity, when cornered, can become truly deadly. The Resolute, once laughed at, now shone as a beacon of hope, power, and unyielding determination. Its legend was written in fire, in courage, and in the hearts of those who had dared to believe that even the slowest, most overlooked ship could change the fate of the galaxy forever.